Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. You're watching another episode of the Small Business Show right here exclusively at ASBN.com and now streaming on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV. Disney, Apple, and Chick-fil-A, the brands of these companies aren't just ordinary, but rather they're legendary. Joining us now is CEO of Swoz Consulting, author and speaker Scott Wozniak. Scott's newest book, Make Your Brand Legendary, Create Raving Fans with the Customer Experience Engine, provides readers with tools to create a legendary brand. Thanks very much for joining us, Scott. Can't wait to jump in here. What entrepreneur watching right now doesn't want raving fans for their brand and their business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, raving fans are not just customers who are happier and behave like everyone else. They really behave differently. To get really technical or kind of business thinking, it's the lifetime value of a customer. Not all customers are equally valuable as a good fit for you. Some of them buy more often. Some of them will tell others to do it. And when they're a real raving fan, man, they will pay top dollar in your category to do this. And so, yeah, there are some customer relationships that change the game.
What would you describe as a legendary brand, first and foremost?
So I describe a legendary brand by looking at their customers. Brand is not what you say about yourself. Okay. Sadly, I mean, it'd be real fun if that was the case, because then we would all just say we're awesome.
Just have PR releases, right? Take care of all of it.
Thank you. Brand is what your customers say about you.
Okay.
So if you want to know if you're a legendary brand, then look and see how many of your customers are raving fans. And we get really measurable. So there's three things you can check. The repeat frequency of your customers, because raving fans they buy more often. So you might have a less frequent business. Like, if you're a restaurant like Chick-fil-A, you want them to come back weekly, monthly, right? If you're
daily,
if you're a wedding planner, you probably don't want annual return visits from your customers, right? But maybe they get bigger packages. They come back for the 20-year anniversary parties, and
they recommend you to other.
That's the next one. It's how much do they buy, and then how many people do they bring? And you can track that. You can measure this stuff. And then this last little bonus is this: raving fans pay full price. So if you're selling at a discount, that may not be a raving fan. They have to believe you're worth it without having to get the hot deal of the day to sign up for you. So this is all measurable. You just go look at your customer base. You probably have some today and say, how many of them are raving fans? And if the majority of your customers are not in this high value category, you're not yet a legendary brand. I mean, and if you are, this is the part where I missed. 25 years ago, I'm blowing Chick-fil-A off. They weren't big back then. They didn't have a lot of the fancy the cow campaign, eat more chicken. They hadn't developed that yet. Their drive-through, they were still mostly malls. So there wasn't even a cool drive-through that we love, right? But what they did have was raving fans. Year after year after year, their fans just keep coming back and back and back. That's how you evaluate, not by how fancy your advertising is or even the size of your company. You're going to be a legendary brand if you have the majority of your people as raving fans.
Yeah. And it's a solid foundation to build your company on, because if you're not doing it with 100 customers, then you're probably also not going to do it with 1,000 customers, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And you might create so many headaches, because if you're grinding just to get 100 and then you lose them and have to replace 100, and you're trying to get and replace 1,000 customers every year, every month, that actually could be a terrible life. The worst thing to do is to scale an inefficient, ineffective system. If you grow something that's really sloppy, you've just grown nightmares, man. Your chances of taking a restful vacation just went out the window.
That's right.
Build your engine with excellence and then scale that sucker.
That's right. That's very, very good advice for sure. Talk to me about writing the book. What was the motivation behind writing this latest book?
Yeah. So, I mean, legitimately, this is going to sound a little fluffy, but I needed to help more people than I could physically get to. So I've been doing this work for, again, over 20 years. I've got a consulting team, 18 consultants, and we only work with the best of the best. And so it's these elite, high level, cool custom projects. And honestly, I just can't physically get far enough. Part of the issue of writing the book was, man, how are we going to keep sharing this stuff and getting these things out without just breaking my personal life?
Yeah.
This is the lessons I give. These are the conversations I have with my clients. In many ways, some parts of the book are, this is the workshop I just led. So I'd sit down and write out the workshop I just taught to that client and put that in the book. It's the stuff I'm giving clients that I can't do personally. Can't get everywhere, but you know what? A book can get everywhere. And I'm still going to show up personally to some great places, but
Yeah.
again, that doesn't scale. My calendar doesn't scale. A book can scale.
There's no question about it, and we're glad you wrote the book. In the book, you talk about the customer experience engine. Can you share with us the concept behind that and its role in creating legendary brands?
Absolutely. This is the core diagram or metaphor that drives the content of the book. We'll do a high level blitz through the engine systems. So the first one is this. The fuel that pours into the engine on the diagram is customer insight. Do you really know your customers? And what we find when we work with our clients is most people think they have insight, but what they really have is customer data. We know facts about them, but we don't know why. We know what they buy, when they buy, maybe their zip code, right? But we don't know why they picked us, what the story, what's going on in their life, the role we play, right? So then when you have this insight, what do you provide for them? Well, three things. The heart of the engine has three gears: operational excellence, personalized service, and memorable moments. So operational excellence, it's the biggest gear in the diagram because the first question, the most critical question your customers are asking is, can I trust you? Listen, this is the game. Until you get a yes, we trust you, nothing else matters. You can't, and this is the mistake I see people make when they're trying to create raving fans. They skip this one because it's boring and basic, and they want to go to the fun parties, right? Like, partial excellence doesn't get you partial trust. Inconsistent excellence earns the same trust as consistent failure. It's got to get to a high enough bar that we're like, no, I pretty much, listen, you can bobble a tiny bit, but only the tiniest bit. If you drop the ball, I would say, even my experience, even 85 to 90% excellence is enough to make them not trust you. Out of 10 times you drop it, they're like, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust those guys. So that's this, get some excellence done. And then little bitty touches can have big impact because they trust you. So personalized is all about making a personal connection. The question they're asking is, do you see me and do you care about me? Do I matter, or are we just my generic transaction here, right? Then if you've done all that, they love you and they're not talking about you. There's a world of difference between a loving fan and like a raving fan. A raving fan raves. They talk. They say, you got to listen to the show and you got to come back. Those guys, how do you do that? First, you get them to love you, and then you add the last gear, which is memorable moments. And you create these moments that pop in their memory. Because what we learned is people don't tell facts, they tell stories. So you have to create story-worthy moments that they're like, oh, let me tell you this thing I heard or saw, or even better, participated in. I got to be in the story. Let me tell you the story. And that's how things go viral. And then the last part of the engine is a belt. It originally wasn't in the engine, but I just, in the early days, I did it enough and ran across this problem. Like, why isn't it working? And we realized if you don't have a healthy leadership team running this whole thing as a shared group, that's why it's a belt that connects all the gears and keeps everything running smooth. The whole team's got to buy in, because if you run half the engine, you get none of the benefit. So yeah, ended up adding this belt as like, we've got to stop and check and say, is our team truly aligned? Do we have a shared win? Or is it like, yeah, good luck for you, but I'm going to do my program. I don't care. If your company tells two different stories, your customers believe neither of them.
Yeah.
Everything has to point in the same direction. So that's the engine. And there's lots of tools and tactics for it, but get insight, show up with excellence, make a personal touch, and then do once or twice a year. I mean, just a little bitty thing. Do something that pops, that gets them to talk about you. And if your whole team can run that play, man, like the normal output of your company is a raving fan. It's not magic. It's not luck. It just becomes like, yeah, some people won't buy it, but the vast majority of people who go through that experience will come out the other side saying, these guys are awesome. I got to come back. Oh, you got to come with me. They do the behaviors that make you a legendary brand.
And you touched on trust being one of the number one things. If they don't trust you,
man,
they're not going to do business with you. And if they do business with you, and they're not feeling good about it, they're probably not going to come back to do business with you, right?
That's
that
right.
Trust isn't there.
We say, okay, so let me give you the Scott Wozniak plan to ruin your brand permanently. And I know this is why everyone listening in today, right? Here we go. I would actually, if I was trying to do that, I would actually set you up with world-class marketing and advertising and bad operations. Because then you would get everybody to come try you out, right? And then discover, oh, wait, we don't trust these guys. And they would tell everybody, yeah, don't work with them. And give me 2 years tops. We could run your brand into the ground and nobody will touch you with a 10-foot pole. Yeah, if you don't get the trust right. And listen, that's been important always. But honestly, I think it's ever increasingly important. Sadly, we live in a time where trust is on the decline. The default for most people in modern Western cultures is I don't trust. And so when you find somebody you do trust, it's not just good business. It literally makes people's lives better. They're like, this is why I think you see these, to me, sometimes surprising outpouring of loyalty and passion for a product or a brand, because somewhere, somebody they count on, they can trust. People are desperate and hungry for this. Don't blow past the trust. It is something people are desperate for today.
Yeah, no question about it. The book is Make Your Brand Legendary, Create Raving Fans with the Customer Experience Engine. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Mr. Scott Wozniak, CEO of Swoz Consulting, also an author, obviously, with this new book, and great speaker. So thank you so much, Scott. We'd love to have you back. There's so many more questions I've got here that time won't allow today, but great topic. And man, this is a must read for every business owner out there that cares about building a brand that becomes legendary. So Scott, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
Great, thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.